Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I am your host, Greg Thompson, joined by my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
I am here, and I'm with you.
You are here. You are surviving amongst the shutdown about you, and we are just trying to make it through day by day.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the kids were a little rough on me today, but no worse for the wear. I'm a better man because of it.
Good man. We're excited here to talk to everybody today. Got a lot of good things going on. We're going to open it up by just talking a little bit about cover1.net. We have an entire army of people heading down to the Senior Bowl. I literally think we have 5 or 6 guys.
That's like a
down.
gaggle.
It's crazy. So Eric is going down. They're going to be doing crazy film breakdowns. We have Jordan, we have Christian, we have Russell. Everybody heading down there doing individual player breakdowns. We're actually going to be going as far as putting out film of the individual practices, obviously of the game, breakdowns each night. And because of that, we're going to be running a promo for premium membership to be able to jump in anytime between now and through the game next Sunday. So for the next 10 days, we are running a $10 premium member Slack membership that will get you in for the rest of the year. I can't tell you how many things I frivolously waste $10 on. This will be the best $10 that you spend. I can say that in all sincerity. So I know I have a lot of favorite parts of it, but Aaron, what do you like most about the premium membership?
Yeah, right now that price, that's a great deal, honestly. And like you said, with the draft coming up, I'll drop $25-$30 on draft guides all day. So to get something that lasts you the whole year and the amount of content that comes out, like you said, my favorite parts really is the Slack channel for me. I get the most out of that, just the constant communication all throughout the day. We've done everything from life advice on engagement rings to real Bills talk. I mean, it always circles back to Bills talk, but there's a lot of fun in between. And I feel like even though I haven't met anyone in the Slack channel personally, I felt like I've made a lot of good friends over the last year and just a good group of guys talking Bills. And sometimes when I'm really frustrated on Twitter with the conversations and the arguments and just getting stuck in the weeds with people and everyone trying to prove each other, you're wrong. It's not really like that in the Slack channel. It's, I don't necessarily agree with you and here's why, and having a nice civil conversation, and everybody seems to respect each other in that sense. So it's kind of a safe space on the internet to talk Bills, where I'm not feeling like I'm being attacked or feeling like I have to prove anything to anybody. And that is really what I like. And then also the stuff you did the other day, that interview, we'll talk about that later, but being able to get that premium content before anyone else gets it is a really nice thing too. So I'm a big fan, and yeah, I think the Slack's my favorite part of the premium membership.
I agree, man. It's fantastic. It's how I found out about Cover One. It's how I ended up kind of stumbling into this role and joining up with you and doing this, is just having a group of people that can have intelligent conversation about the Bills and about football in general, or about how to propose to your fiance or whatever it might be. It's just a good group of people and a really great community. So I welcome all of you to come and join us. $10 is ridiculous. You can't beat it with a stick. It's something fantastic that I would invite all of you to do. And the timing is awesome because, even though it's the off season, you're actually about to go into some of our best content with what we're able to provide leading up to individual player breakdowns, especially if you're more of a pro fan and you want to be able to get a little bit more insight on, hey, who are the Bills going to be looking at? Who are going to be a good fit? How's that going to work? It's something to be able to have those kind of detailed video breakdowns, full write-ups and information on each of the prospects coming out in the draft and potential signings and things like that. So really great opportunity, and I advise it strongly. Yeah,
and with the Senior Bowl, real quick, Eric had me do an article last year, and I couldn't find it. I didn't really look hard, but we went through Bills drafts of Senior Bowl players, and then also just Brandon Beane drafts he was involved in Senior Bowl players. And it was very interesting.
That article.
Yeah, it was very interesting to actually look through that and see out of whatever 8 picks, how many of that came out of the Senior Bowl. And it's a pretty substantial amount every year that they are looking at guys at the Senior Bowl. So if you're interested and want to really get an idea of who the Bills are going to be targeting, I think you should take a look at the content that we're going to be doing over Senior Bowl weekend, because if Eric is good at a lot of things, but I think particularly what he's good at is seeing the needs of the Bills and applying what he sees in the players to saying, I think this is a McDermott guy. I think this is a Bean guy. He's hit the nail on the head with a number of guys. And so if you want to kind of get a feel for what the Bills are doing or who they're looking at, I think you got to be following the content that's going to be coming out of the Senior Bowl from the team this weekend or that weekend.
Absolutely. Why don't we jump right into some of the news we had going on this week? We actually did have a handful. I think one of the biggest ones, a lot of people were really excited, kind of a resigning that we expected and that was kind of a relief to see kind of a locker room leader and somebody re-signed on a team-friendly deal. So, Aaron, what are your thoughts on Jeremiah Searles back in the fold?
But I think it's huge for the team. No,
Lorenzo Alexander being re-signed along with Jeremiah Searles. What are your thoughts on bringing those guys back?
Yeah, so I got the awesome chance to be on Pat Morin's podcast over the last week here, and we talked about that a little bit. And I think both he and I agreed, and you and I have talked about it here on this podcast, that it is a no-brainer. I don't think anybody was shocked at the news this afternoon and was like, oh my God, we were able to bring him back. Everybody wanted to get a deal done. The deal is a team-friendly deal. He just keeps kind of going. It's just an extended year. It really is the definition of an extension. He just has one more year to get it done. I think the one thing I kind of got from the deal, because it's similar to what he was already making, right? Like it's basically in line with what he already made. So you expect to at least get more, just with that's how things tend to go. Like if you're only going to do a 1 year deal, that you would get more. What I took away from that is that I think Lorenzo himself and the team is expecting a less of a role on field production from Lorenzo Alexander. And that this is really just hey, we really respect you and what you bring to the locker room, what you bring to this team. And, if you want to ride out this final year with us and be a leader and be a coach and be a teacher and still provide on field, I'm not saying he won't, but in a less of a capacity, here's the deal that we're willing to do. And I think it's a great fit for both.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, it's about $3 million in base salary. It has some additional incentives to be able to help him out if he does have a nice big season from a sack standpoint back to the Pro Bowl, maybe even some team-based incentives. So he can get taken care of if he does a nice job, but is back on a fair deal that is, team friendly, but paying him a reasonable amount, not asking him to play for the veteran minimum or anything like that. And I think it really solidifies that group. I know Jason in the chat was asking about, does he think we'll look at any further linebackers? And the only exception I can think of, and I'll talk about it later on with my interview with Jordan Rodriguez, was probably Thomas Davis is the only exception. Having Milano under contract, having Tremaine Edmonds under contract, even Julian Stanford under contract, and now re-signing Zoe, I don't expect a lot of money spent at linebacker. And the only exception I can think of is getting a locker room leader like a Thomas Davis that lets you shift Lorenzo Alexander almost full-time into pass rush and special teams mode. So I don't expect much beyond that. I think this is pretty much our linebacker room with maybe one exception from the draft or from Thomas Davis.
Yeah, I won't be shocked if they address it in the draft, and it would be a perfect time to do it where you have Lorenzo on a 1 year deal and try to find somebody to play kind of behind him and pick his brain for a year. I think that'd be a perfect fit. It's something similar to what we saw with Harrison Phillips last year. Obviously, Harrison's not taking over the Kyle Williams role, but just being able to be in that room with Kyle for a year is a huge thing for a rookie. So I won't be shocked if they address more linebackers in the draft to bring somebody in. But yeah, I agree with you. If it's not Thomas Davis, I can't see them going out and targeting linebacker as a way to spend the money that they do have this year. There's just too many. If there wasn't as many holes across the board, sure, you could get a little frivolous with the money, but I think a lot of fans aren't realizing how many holes actually need to be filled. And even with as much money as they have, they will not be filling all the holes that they have.
Well, so there's two ways to look at that. One is, you're right, a realistic view that we're not going to all of a sudden fill every single hole. The other one is we don't have that many players to re-sign. I'm going to run through a couple here, and I think we have one or two that are maybe on the target. But, our available remaining unsigned players are Ryan Groy, Jordan Mills, Jordan Phillips, Tywan Jones, Logan Thomas, Deontay Thompson, John Miller, Lafayette Pitts, Eddie Yarborough. I didn't include Matt Darr and Vontae Davis. Reed Ferguson is listed here, but he's already announced that he's going to re-sign.
Right.
I think Eddie Yarborough is still technically an exclusive rights free agent, so his only choice is to come back to Bill's camp. and to track the team. Beyond that, I mean, Aaron, what are your first thoughts out of that list of illustrious players that you even want to see brought back?
Yeah, definitely target Taiwan Jones. I think he becomes your number. No, I am a big Taiwan Jones.
I would be surprised if he comes back. Obviously,
Yeah.
you need to have a fit with the guy we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, but
Sure.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, no, I think you're going to see actually more of those people back than maybe fans think on really cheap deals, minimum deals, things that just get them back in the building. I do think consistency is important to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. That's in the locker room, walking around the halls, in the meeting rooms. That type of consistency is big for them. And some of these guys are good at some of the things they do. Taiwan Jones is a good special teams player, and we talked about that depth, this amount of, getting rid of all that. Obviously, I think Jordan Phillips is the top priority on that list, and I expect him to have his deal done next here before we head into any of the real action of the offseason. Outside of that, we were talking about in the Slack channel a little bit today, they're probably bringing back another one or two of those linemen from a year ago, hopefully on cheap deals. I had kind of mentioned that, just because they bring them back doesn't mean they're a 53-man roster guy, but I think that some of these guys are going to get shots to be on this team that went through the year last year, and see if this new offensive line coach thinks that they're a fit as well. But I think they'll get signed here. They want to keep their own guys, and hopefully they're backups, or things have gone so well that we don't need them in the 53-man roster.
Yeah, and I know we joke about Jeremiah Searles. I mean, he was brought back. He's probably the example of that, is that, maybe he's your 8th or 9th lineman. Maybe he makes the roster, but he felt like his best chance was to make this roster versus another one. I think you could see that kind of re-signing with a Deontay Thompson, maybe that kind of thing. Again, the Eddie Yarborough, maybe even Lafayette Pitts. And I don't care. They're camp bodies. They can come back. I think Jordan Phillips is a roster player. I actually was kind of hoping they'd be announced all at the same time. Not that that means his representation is playing hardball or doing anything crazy, but I would have liked it if it came out already and that meant it was kind of already hammered out. So I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing, but I would have just felt better if it was already announced, because he's a 26-year-old guy, not making a lot of money, probably looking for his first real payday. So I'm going to be curious to see if his valuation lines up with Beane's, and we know how firm Beane stays to that. I think Taiwan Jones is an obvious one, if that's the kind of guy that Heath Farwell wants on his special teams. He's been a key special teams contributor. We lost Andre Holmes. We lost a couple other guys like that. So I'd be open to that kind of thing. And the one you really touched on was, I don't know that we're going to see one or two or three of them, but I'd be shocked if one of Ryan Groy, Jordan Mills, and John Miller aren't back. And my guess is Jordan Mills. We've talked a lot. Eric has kind of spread the praises of a, Yadni Kajust out of West Virginia, Cody Ford out of Oklahoma.
There's a kid about Jonah something.
Would you stop it? I happen to have a unhealthy obsession with Jonah Williams from Alabama, but whoever we end up going after, it's very likely one of our top 2 or 3 picks in the draft are going to be an offensive tackle or a strong offensive lineman. If it's a 2nd or 3rd round pick, maybe you want Jordan Mills to be there as kind of a Band-Aid to get you through the first little bit, make sure he's ready to start, be a really valuable backup that can be in there, because Jordan Mills isn't great, but he's not the worst tackle in the NFL. Like he's kind of a, really good backup, really bad starter guy. So I could see him coming back. The good thing is we don't have a lot of guys that need to be re-signed and we have to haggle with. But the bad news is we don't have a lot of guys to re-sign to fill the many holes that we have. And we're going to see a lot of new names. Yeah,
Jason Suritis. I'm probably Suritz.
Yeah, that's my guess.
I'll butcher it. That's mine. Talked about Jerry, plans for pass rusher, whether it's a linebacker or defensive end. He talks about Jerry Hughes not getting any younger. There's an interesting, I don't know who to give credit to on Twitter. I'll have to look it up and put it in the comments later. Somebody had something on Twitter that I had read and saw was a little interesting about what do you do with Jerry Hughes coming up on a contract year next year? Do you extend him now while you have some money? He's not getting any younger. It was an interesting poll that I saw, and my vote was to get him extended now for maybe a 2 to 3 year deal. You don't have to live out the 3 years of the deal, but get him extended, maybe get it a little more team friendly now. And because no money in the NFL is guaranteed, but I think that you can keep. I think the priority's got to be outside of re-signing your own guys now and the targets in free agency and the draft. I think one of the targets and one of the top priorities for this team is how do you keep Jerry Hughes maybe for the rest of his career, but if not, for at least the next couple 2 to 3 years, because I think he's got it in him and he hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. What are your thoughts there?
I love it. It's actually funny. There's a couple guys that we go back and forth with a lot on Twitter, and Chris Hoffman's one of the guys that I talk to a lot. That we were actually getting down like into contract level details on the deal. I think it's really smart to re-sign him. He's due $9 million this year. So we were talking about maybe 2 additional years at 14 or 16 million, 7 to 8 million a year. You front load that, give him some money now, give him another, maybe even 10 of that in the following year. And then all of a sudden you have a cheap, maybe $2 or $3 million deal in the last year that either we're happy to keep him at that cheaper level when he'll be 31 this year, 32 the following year, 33. But the way that the Bills rotate their defensive line, I think that you can really keep that, active, productive model from him at 40 to 60% of the snaps, where you're not asking him to play $1 million, but you do probably need to invest in someone else. I know I'm higher on Trent Murphy than most at being another guy there to really contribute and have a whole offseason where he's not rehabbing from an ACL and able to really step in and be productive. When he was healthy, he was good. So I think that we're going to get more there. And then I think we need another guy. Shaq Lawson is coming up here on his 5th-year option, so we have him this year. But by May, we have to decide, are we going to commit to $10.2 million on his 5th-year option? I don't think he's worth $10 million, but I like the contract security that locks up. I'd prefer that we do the exact same thing as I proposed to Jerry, get him back on a 2-year, $14 million deal, $7 million a year, and try to, then lock that up for the next couple of years there for your defensive end rotation and draft a guy that can come in to be able to, be the younger guy there and compete with Mike Love and Eddie Yarborough. So I think that re-signing Jerry Hughes makes a lot of sense. We can front load it while we have the cap space and make him cheap when he's older. And then again, I think we keep Trent Murphy. I think we keep Shaq Lawson. And then I'd love to see us draft a younger guy in the later rounds to be able to develop behind them and compete with Eddie Yarborough.
Absolutely. And another thing to keep in mind is we see the loaded assets for 2019 for this team. I don't believe that it's all going to get spent or it's all going to be used in the way people think it will be, and that 2020 is still a rebuilding year. I know fans don't want to hear that. And I know Twitter, if I put that on Twitter, I'll probably get killed all night. I might try it just to see what happens, but I do think 2020 is still going to be a year to continue to build this roster, because like we just said earlier, they're not going to fill all the holes with the 10 picks and all the cap space that they have. They're not going to spend all the cap that they have this year. So keep that in mind when we're trying to talk about filling holes and things like that. You're going to still have to pick and choose. There's going to be tough choices. And when the 53 roster comes out, just like every team in the league, there's going to be some weaknesses. There's going to be some holes, and there's going to be some things that were just left undone because they weren't able to. There's just not a situation in the league. I don't care what your cap space and draft picks are like that you can form a perfect roster.
Yeah, and we won't get into it tonight. I actually did a tiered structure out on Twitter, a thread that was out there that went over my offensive line free agent wish list and where I'd spend money on. But we have a lot of shows that we'll get into more detail on that as we get further into the offseason. Tonight, one of the other elements that we had was some news was 2 new coaching hires being reported. So obviously the Bills moved on from offensive line coach Juan Castillo, special teams coordinator and Aaron Quinn favorite Danny Crossman, and our wide receiver coach Terry Rubisky. So we'll start on the offensive line. What are your thoughts on Bobby Johnson? Bobby Johnson brought in, he was the assistant line coach in Indiana, and actually coming back to the Bills, he was the assistant line coach in 2010, 2011. What are your thoughts on Bobby Johnson?
I don't have any. No, I really don't. Like these coaches, I just don't know a ton about their work, and it's hard to say what an assistant offensive line coach does. I know you can. It's hard to judge any of these. That isn't an OC, that isn't a defensive coordinator. You can go by PFF rankings of their units, but that still doesn't tell the entire story of who they are and if they're a good teacher or not. What I did like was Eric Wood coming out and saying that he's a good coach, and then Kyle Rudolph
chiming in
on that too. And that's where I don't care about, particular analyst's view of assistant coach, assistant offensive line coach. What I want to know is how they interact with players, and if players think that they're good teachers, because that's ultimately all we care about is development of young players and the guys they're bringing in. So it sounds like he's a good teacher. It threw me off a little though, because you heard about the offensive line coach from Indy getting let go by Frank Wright, and I think everybody was pointing that way, and then all of a sudden the news breaks that we're getting the assistant offensive line coach when you thought it was going to be the offensive line coach. But it looks like I think they got a good fit. Everyone's writing that it's a good fit, but outside of who he is and what he stands for, I don't know. I just hope he fits right into the process and is a good mesh with Brian Dable, and that they can fix the worst part of the team.
Yeah, that's what I took from it, was that I was glad to see that Brian Dable was able to come in and kind of put his stamp on the offense, obviously have a major hand in some of these hires. And I think we're still waiting for the wide receiver coach to be announced. But being able to bring someone in who has some familiarity, got some immediate, credentials from and credit from other players that we trust. I think that's a great sign that we have somebody talented and capable, and, we'll kind of have to look through what that turns into going forward. Like you said, I'm not an assistant line coach expert to know what his skill set is, but hopefully he has an aggressive style, is able to find his guys. There's a couple things that we've talked about. I played around a little bit with some of the free agent guys. Roger Saffold is a guard for the Rams that a lot of people are targeted. He did overlap with Bobby Johnson, has a connection there. So maybe that's something we can reach out to. Again, you talked about Kyle Rudolph. He's a potential cap casualty with the Vikings at tight end. That's somebody we could maybe consider bringing in. So I do like the fact that he's been at a couple different stops as he's grown and gotten to this point of his first opportunity as the head position coach, that maybe he's able to have some of those connections. And you see that a lot. When Juan Castillo came over, he brought over his guys. When Aaron Kromer went to LA, he brought his guys with there. It happens a lot. So I expect that to be something we see here with some guys he has some history with in some of the free agent signings, besides maybe a top end guy that's just good anyways. But some of the value level guys, I'd be surprised if it's not someone he has history with.
Yeah, I'm all for it. People make fun of, and this is going to go off a little away from this particular topic, but people go off all the time on the Carolina connection between Bean, McDermott, and Carolina, even when it's not even a real connection. But the thing is, and it happens in every workplace across the whole world, when you have a position where you can make decisions and it's time to hire people, you're going to work with people you trust. And if you have a chance to hire somebody that you've worked with in the past, and you've gone into battle with them and you trust them, and that they are doing things the way that you have them doing it or have taught them to do it, you're going to go with that. So I don't understand why people care when people bring in people that they've worked with in the past. Like that is just very much human nature, and I can't blame them, because I would do the same exact thing. I want people I can trust, that I know what I'm getting out of them.
Yeah, I agree. And having that familiarity, I know, like you said, people kind of talk about it's not your 5 best individual players. It's the 5 cohesive guys together that gel and can be a unit. So I think that's what we want to see, and have those guys kind of work their way together.
Absolutely, yeah.
So again, I know we talked about the next hire that came up. Both of us were incredibly sad to see Danny Crossman go. We were both big fans of his work on the special teams side of the ball, and wished him nothing but the best in his future endeavors. But finally, we were able to replace him with Heath Farwell, who I had the pleasure of interviewing. Jordan Rodrigue, who is the Charlotte Observer beat writer for the Carolina Panthers, and kind of broke the story on the signing there. You guys may actually remember him. He was a Pro Bowler with the Vikings as a special teams guy, then went over and was a 3-year captain with the Seahawks, including the captain in their Super Bowl season, and was a Pro Bowl level and captain level player who never played a down of linebacker on the field. He was only an exclusively special teams guy. And Jordan actually wrote an awesome article. It's called Insanity or Genius, that ran earlier in the summer about the Chase Blackburn, who's the special teams coach in Carolina, and then at the time their assistant special teams coach, Heath Farwell, and that they're just psychopaths basically running around and going crazy. But it was an awesome read, and that I think we got, if Sean McDermott could design a special teams coach in a laboratory, it would be Heath Farwell. It's incredible. So I think it's going to be an awesome signing. He's going to be aggressive. One of the things Jordan really touched on was how much Heath talked about designing special teams game plans like you're an offense or a defense. And that it's not just, hey, this is our punt return mode. This is our kick block setup. This is how we do, kickoff coverage. He was very specific on game and competitor and team specific matchups and changing the special teams game plan team to team and week to week. That I think it's going to be really interesting to see that kind of approach. And that's actually the approach that Bill Belichick has talked about, that special teams is a third of the game. It can win you a game. It can flip fields. It can get you a turnover, and that you have to approach it as a matchup that you can take advantage of from players. And I'm going to use one example that a lot of people saw on social media the last day or two. The New Orleans Saints viewed that the Eagles were playing a lot of just defensive matchup in their punt coverage in case someone faked it. They were actually excited about that because they saw that in those plays, the Eagles kept their front starting defensive line out there, which meant Fletcher Cox was out there. Well, Fletcher Cox didn't take these plays very seriously. He would take like one lazy step forward and just stand up, never fired out of his stance, knew it was going to be a punt, and was just annoyed he had to be on the field. They ran their fourth down fake punt directly at Fletcher Cox, who is the best defender on the Eagles, but they did it because they understood the matchup. And they knew that, hey, this guy's not taking it seriously. And if we have like a 4th and 2 and need to just pick up something easy, we can double team him and blow him the hell off the ball because he's not paying attention. Right. And they picked up a 4th down conversion in the NFC divisional round because of special teams matchup. So that's, again, just a random example, but it's something relevant that people are seeing now being reported. And that's the kind of approach that Heath Farwell is bringing. And I can't say I knew a ton about exactly what Danny Crossman was doing, but it sure didn't seem that innovative from anything I saw.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know a lot about this guy outside of what I listened to on your interview. And I did read that article. You had reposted her article as well. And I read that. So I didn't really know anything about the guy until that moment when I took in that information, but anything would have been better than Danny Crossman, in my opinion. All I care about, it will be fantastic if special teams comes out and wins a couple games for you. But all I really need out of the special teams unit is to not lose football games. And that is what Danny Crossman did. So as long as this guy comes out and his units play with discipline, they are in the positions that they're supposed to be in, and they're not committing the bonehead penalties all the time and doing bonehead things all the time, then I'm going to feel pretty happy about it. And he's got to feel pretty happy about this unit too, because prior to his injury, your best friend, Borges, was looking fantastic. He was looking like a steal. And if Hauschka can get over whatever was happening with him at the end of the year, we're assuming that there was some kind of injury, although it was never officially noted that there was an injury.
Beyond the dirty hit back injury.
That's why we assumed it. And but never on an injury report, nothing after the season. He's been traveling around the world. So as long as he gets back to who we think he is, this guy's got to be pretty excited that this special teams, as far as the kickers go, is a great unit, and that they have removed all this dead cap and are really going to be able to fill him in with some decent talent to get the job done.
Yeah, I think that another part that we talked about, and the one kind of silver lining that I gave Danny Crossman, was the bottom end of our roster was rough. It was all minimum contract guys. We even gave up a couple of his best coverage guys. He lost both Tywan Jones and Andre Holmes for injury and for release. So I don't know that he was set up in a great position, but he also was a net negative and didn't bring anything to the table of improving what was out there. So I think the opportunity to now really bolster the bottom third of our roster, I think we're going to see a lot better depth. We have 10 more draft picks. I think we're going to use some of those later draft picks on the backup linebacker, backup safety, backup corner, athletic defensive end, backup tight end, backup running back. Those are going to be guys who do contribute on special teams. And that's probably a skill they're going to be looking at to be able to use those draft picks for guys who might stick on the roster in that specific role. We might even take a 5th, 6th, 7th round guy specifically for his special team skill set. And I think that that's something that is going to put Heath Farwell in a better position to have dedicated people that are going to stick on the roster, not constantly churning it over as much as we did this year. There's always going to be roster churn from injuries and from just a bottom guy not making it. But, we rotated the bottom 15 guys on the roster this year, the bottom 20. And, that's tough to keep up with and hard for anyone to be, productive, let alone a below average coach like what we had. So I'm excited that Heath Farwell's coming in. I'm excited about his attitude. I'm excited about the opportunity he's going to have a little bit more talent than some of the other people. And then I think that that's going to put us in a better position to have, like you said, at least average special teams. I don't need them to be spectacular. I haven't seen a kick return for a score in years. That'd be kind of neat. I'd love.
Yeah, I don't want to see Micah Hyde out there catching punts anymore. So if somebody could just come out and do it with consistency, and we could keep Micah Hyde off the field, that would be fantastic. And Prospect Watcher says, and I was going to bring this point up too. Hopefully, Saren Neal gets a role on the defense or use this frequent special teams unit. I don't know about a role on the defense here in 2019. I still think he's a developmental player to get on the defensive side of the ball, but it would be nice if this new special teams coach can really elevate him, because I think there's a lot of potential there, and it didn't quite pan out the way I thought it was going to in 2018, where I thought he was going to really excel on special teams. I think he has the ability, though, to be one of those guys that, like you mentioned, like the coach himself, Farwell, that could really carve out a niche in this league on special teams and be a guy that is just your captain of special teams type contributor for a long period of time. And if he can get that out of Saren Neal or develop players in that way, then I think you really have something awesome. But again, if he can just not lose us games, then I'm totally happy with that too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that Neal is a great example. He's the guy who stepped in for Andre Holmes after that release as the primary gunner. And he struggled here and there, but towards the end, he did start to flash. And I saw a couple plays where he really was out there making some big hits, getting himself free. So I think someone like Farwell, who literally that was his job, he was that number one guy. I think he can really bring a lot to the table to show what the capabilities are, how to be able to do this. And as a guy who takes that technique and scheme very seriously. And I think we could see a guy like Saren Neal maybe have a chance to flourish, or going to have some competition brought in with this year's draft that he's going to have to step up, or else he might not have a roster spot.
And so all you're saying is I have to pay $10 for a premium membership for the whole year, and I get to listen to your interview?
That's true. That's exactly correct. So again, just a quick bump for the Cover One special that we're running. Our premium members are going to have a chance to get in for the entire year for $10. And I talked earlier, I waste $10 on the silliest things. This is going to be a really good opportunity for you to get in. I think our Slack membership is worth it by itself. The video breakdowns we do, every interview that I normally reach out and do, we do as a premium sneak preview. So when I got a hold of Farhan, who broke the Duke Williams signing, Jordan Rodrigue, who broke the Heath Farwell hiring. I reach out to those guys. We do it as kind of a sneak preview, and the premium members get to hear that for the first couple of days as kind of a sneak preview to it before we release it to the public. We have awesome breakdowns. Eric provides a crazy amount of video breakdowns that are out there. So this special is going to run from today through next Sunday, through the Senior Bowl. While they're there, we're sending an entire army of people down there to do everything. So certainly worthwhile to check that out. It's going to be a great value and something you'll really enjoy. Before we wrap up here, Aaron, any other thoughts? I know we don't have a new wide receiver coach. I'm expecting that to come here in the next couple days. I know they brought in Joe Philbin for an interview, and I know there was some discussion of kind of that vague senior offensive assistant role. I don't know if he has a history at wide receiver. I know that a lot of people assumed it was offensive line. Any thoughts on what we'll see there, or anything you've heard or rumors you've seen?
I haven't seen any rumors. The only thing that I keep seeing on Twitter, and I've talked about it on the Slack channel, I don't really know where it comes from, is this idea, and it could happen. Anything can happen. I'm not going to say that it won't or that it's impossible. There is a non-zero chance, as you like to say, that it exists. Yeah.
It's my favorite chance.
Oh, yeah. And but that Cully is going to somehow not be the quarterback coach and move over to wide receiver coach. I get he has a history at that. I was frustrated when they made him a quarterback coach that he didn't have any experience as that. But I don't think that he did anything last year to prove to me that he's a bad quarterback coach. I'm not in the quarterback room, so I can't speak to the experience of how he is as a teacher or anything like that. But what I did see was Josh Allen progressed as a passer throughout the year and got better as the season went on. And I don't know if that is because of Cully or if that's because of Dable or if that's because the conversations that he has with Jordan Palmer. I know people were saying, why don't we just bring in Jordan Palmer and move Cully to a wide receivers coach, or anytime somebody with a name that has ever worked with a good quarterback becomes available, let's get them. I think consistency for Josh Allen's key. I just don't see that move happening. And I don't see any reason. I haven't seen anything that would indicate that they need to really do that right now and make that move. Because like I said, Josh Allen got better. So I don't think that that's going to be what it is. I think we're going to get some guy that you haven't heard much about at wide receiver coach, similar to what we have in the last two hires in the coaching staff. And it might be somebody that's worked with Dable in the past. I don't know. But as long as it's a guy that's a good teacher and can develop the young people that I know they're going to draft somebody, or I'm hoping that they're going to draft somebody. And as long as they can develop this young talent that they have and make sure Robert Foster doesn't fall off and Zay Jones doesn't slump, that's all I care about.
No, I think you're spot on, and that's exactly what my prediction is. My prediction is that we are going to hire a wide receiver coach you've never heard of, and that it's going to be a guy that is a first-time position coach. I don't think it's an accident that Bobby Johnson and Heath Farwell are first-time position coaches. I think they're looking for a young, fresh mind with good ideas who's going to come in and is hungry for this opportunity and is not a retread. Might have a history or connection with Dable, but Farwell wasn't a connection with McDermott or Bean. He was there after they had both left Carolina. So
he did play for Frazier.
Yeah, correct. So he played for Frazier in Minnesota. But those kind of things, I think that's the kind of peripheral connection we might get. Somebody they feel comfortable, they can vet and have a good history with. I know a lot of people had said Terry Robisky is one of those guys who is a brilliant football mind and one of the most abrasive personalities they'd ever experienced. And that was repeated ever. He's always respected, but he's just always a very abrasive, harsh personality. So I think it's something that we will see someone they think can grow with it. Very similar, like you said, with Cully, the consistency. We have a very young wide receiver room that's currently only Zay Jones, Robert Foster, Isaiah McKenzie, and Duke Williams. So our oldest guy is 25. So I think that's something you're going to see, that kind of development, that kind of guy brought in who is a teacher that can bring them along. And I'll be shocked if it's somebody we're familiar with or have heard of. So I agree with that. And that's my prediction as well.
Yeah, and that's totally fine with me. Again, going back to what I said earlier, I don't know a lot about these guys that are assistants in the league and things like that. But here's the thing. If they're bringing in somebody that's been on an NFL staff, like all these guys, even the assistant know more about football. They've forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. So they're going to bring in somebody that's qualified to do the job. And I do trust that. And they're going to miss on some of these hires. They already have missed and they're probably going to miss again. So that's okay too. But I'm excited to just round out the roster or round out the coaching staff so that they can move forward and taking a look at 2018 and kind of putting 2018 behind them and moving forward to 2019.
Absolutely. As we get things ready to wrap up here, again, we're going to go through a lot more things this offseason. Aaron and I are going to continue to come to you once a week with different breakdowns, reviewing the news, like in weeks like this where we have plenty of topics to go over that. We'll get into that. We'll get into some projected, recaps from the Senior Bowl. Hopefully have some of the guys on as they get back there to talk about what they saw and people they think might be a fit, as well as names that they saw connected to meeting with or interviewing with the Bills. We'll get into some of our potential free agents. Hopefully we see a little bit more. Both of us would like to see Jordan Phillips re-signed. Both of us kind of expect some of the other names to get re-signed on some veteran minimum deals. And then we'll start to get into, reviewing other names that we hear potentially being released from other teams, some of our wish lists and free agency, how we'd like to see them go into it and how we tier out the guys at the key positions like offensive line, like at tight end, like at wide receiver, maybe an additional athletic linebacker or a guy coming in as a pass rusher. We'll get into those names where we see them from a free agency standpoint, and then do the same thing right through the draft where we see some of those best positions. We have an awesome team together over at cover1.net that are doing entire draft boards, entire mock drafts, and bring a lot of value there. And we'll bring some of those guys on to kind of talk through it as well. So we know it's the off season, but Aaron and I are going to be here with you, taking you through week by week through the rest of the off season to keep you up to date on what's happening with the Bills, and very excited about everything we have. So
yeah, we're going to drag you through the next few months
and streaming possibly.
Yeah. Another cool thing, I haven't even gotten to really talk to Greg about it, but I think in the next week or two, probably next week, if we can find the time to get him on, we're going to talk to our friend Banged Up Bills, Kyle Trimble, wants to come on the show. He did an article recently about DK Metcalf's injury. So he's starting to look at some of these guys that are college guys that had injuries. If you don't know who Banged Up Bills is, definitely worth a follow. Go follow him, Kyle Trimble. He is kind of one of those guys that's a spotter for Dr. Chow, the pro football doctor, and he's one of his spotters. That means when an injury happens, he'll kind of give him his initial diagnosis, but he also does Bills injury specific and writes about the Bills. So he's done a guest piece for us on Metcalf, and I think he's just submitted a Bryce Love one that should be coming out soon. So kind of giving you what Eric does on the analytical side, but giving you the injury report. And he's going to join us and talk about some of the stuff, with Taron Johnson's injury. How's his offseason look? What type of recovery should we expect from him in that surgery? Same thing with Matt Milano. Obviously, that's a big one. A lot of people have questions. They're wondering what Matt Milano is going to come back like. What are the possibilities for Matt Milano? We'll check on that. And one question I asked him, you mentioned Trent Murphy a couple times in this podcast, is what does it look like for Trent Murphy a year out from his ACL surgery and a full off season? Like, what does that type of off season regimen look like for a guy that is a full year off of it? And are we going to see him in camp healthy because he lost a ton of time this summer? And I think that it was a setback from the original surgery. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So make sure that you tune in for that.
Absolutely. You guys can find me out on Twitter at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Always following back Bills fans, trying to have a good time with everybody. I'll continue to put out some of my threads that go through my tiers for guys that I'm looking for, things that I think we can do, and my reaction to the different news that breaks for Bills fans and kind of passing things along. Aaron, where can the people find you?
At Aaron Quinn 716, and I'm talking about all kinds of stuff, and I'll probably be all up in Greg's mentions with GIFs and GIFs and things like that. No, I love to have fun. I love to interact with Bills fans, so come talk to me. I'd love to have people, poke holes in my logic and disagree with me, and I'll give it right back to you. So if you're interested in that and interested in a good debate, come on over.
Absolutely. Looking forward to having a good time with everybody. Again, we'll be here for you all through the off season. Come on over, check out that premium membership on cover1.net, and we will talk to you guys soon. And we're out.